Good afternoon, everyone. If you could please find your seat. Do we think that works? All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started momentarily. If you could please take your seats. All righty. Well, welcome, everyone, to the annual fund meeting. No, it works, but. All righty. Welcome, everyone. Happy Thursday. We're all thrilled to have you here. My name is Morgan Bentavegna. I'm on the development team here at the Beach Company. Just briefly, I know we've got some folks tuning in as well. Obviously, we're thrilled to all have you here. The presentation today is going to be about an hour and a half. We've got the bar will be open the entire time, so feel free to get yourself a beverage during the presentation. We also have the bathrooms here to my left-hand side in the back. Feel free to, if you can't find it, ask one of us. We're happy to help. There will be plenty of time for Q&A intermittently throughout the presentation, and then a longer Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, I'll introduce our chairman and CEO, John Darby.
Hello. Okay, does this work? All right. So the seating is arranged by net worth. You can tell Jim Rottmore is at the front, and it just kind of goes back to Bob Shepard and Charles Williams. So thank you for being here. If you take one thing home today, one takeaway, please know that managing your funds is the most important responsibility in this office. We appreciate your confidence and your trust in the Beach Company, and we work hard for you. I've been in the business. I started in 1985, and there's a lot of lessons you learn with downturns, and I've been through several. Unfortunately, we didn't plan on rates rising so fast as they did in this cycle in such a short period of time. And we also didn't plan on the government municipalities turning a blind eye on processing delinquent tenants. And we'll talk a lot about that today. Those two things have really been headwinds, and it's an issue throughout the industry, and I think you'll hear a little bit about each as we go through each presenter. So Fund 1, there have been some investments that have not performed as forecast, but there's been some investments that exceeded our expectations. So Fund 1 as a whole, we do believe that we're going to reach our projected returns at the completion of the fund, and you'll see some of that today. So the Beach Company just finished its 5-year strategic plan, and we adopted a new one. When you look back at, let's go to the next slide here. So these are the 5 components that make up the Beach Company: beach development, beach investment funds, which we're here to talk about today. Kiowa River is a master plan community, a 2,000-acre master plan community on Johns Island. Gulfstream is one of the largest site contractors in this region. And then the 5th component are all the different support groups to help us do what we do every day: marketing, financial, accounting, brokerage, and so forth. The metrics are different, but when you look back 5 years, each of these components grew on average about 10% a year. And we believe that we will continue to grow those components 10% on average a year over the next 5 years. So with strategic planning, you got to plan on new team members, new staff as you grow, and there's also succession within your leadership. Now, effective next year, 2025, our COO, Dan Doyle, will become president of the Beach Company. I will remain CEO, and then a couple of years later, he will become president and CEO. I will remain chairman of the board. I will be on the funds investment committee, and I will focus most of my time on capital markets, which would include investor relations with folks like you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and we'll get started.
Turn this on real quick. Louis. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. We appreciate you all being here. It's important to us and for you all to hear where we've been and where we're going, not only as a fund, but as a company as well. As John mentioned, we've spent a lot of time in 2023 working on the update to our strategic plan. And we don't take that lightly. And what we've really realized as a result of that update is just how important Beach Real Estate Funds is to the Beach Company, to our operations, and to our strategy going forward. I can't emphasize that enough. And I just want to take time to recognize our dedicated staff that we have running the day-to-day operations of the fund. You'll hear more from those individuals directly here in a moment. But more importantly, the support staff that supports them on a daily basis. Essence Hinton, our fund accounting manager, Claire Kay, our director of tax, Andrew Dennis, our general counsel, Tyler Cooper, our chief financial officer, and our construction management team headed up by Tim Bowman, all play a critical role in helping to add to the success of Beach Real Estate Funds. Now, talk a little bit about our strategic plan and some of the process and how that relates to the fund. Going forward, putting a plan together, you always got to look back. And so we went back and spent a lot of time looking at our update that we did in 2018 and looking at those items that were identified as goals. Beach Real Estate Funds is not only one fund, but 2 funds. Both equity raises were completed. We went ahead and acquired a stable of properties here throughout the Southeast that you see today. More importantly, we harvested some pretty incredible gains and returns in those early years of the fund. All successes that we can look back on. But we also have to realize we're facing some pretty strong headwinds right now. Things that we have to take on and be prepared for. John mentioned, first and foremost, interest rates. What is the run-up that we've experienced over the past 24 months? It's unprecedented. And how that has impacted the funds. Primarily, the cash flow that's available for distribution. So that's something that we're going to talk about here at great length. In addition, the comment regarding delinquencies. This is an industry-wide issue. It's not specific to beach real estate funds. This is a major issue facing the multifamily industry, and it's something that we are not immune to, nor is any other operator immune to today. When you have government agencies that are crafting policies that essentially prohibit you from removing a non-paying resident from a unit, that creates extreme difficulty. We see some headway being made there, but quite frankly, it is something that has devastated specific markets. Primarily Atlanta and Fulton County are probably the best example, and unfortunately, we have a property there, Parks at Utoy Creek. So it's something to really keep in mind. But despite these headwinds that we're facing today, we do believe there's opportunity on the horizon, and we do think it's a great time to be in real estate, specifically multifamily. And we believe we're well positioned to go ahead and take advantage and execute on those opportunities that lie before us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ward McCarthy, our Director of Portfolio Management, and he's going to get into the details and the overview on Fund 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Well, welcome everyone to the 4th Annual Beach Investment Fund Annual Meeting presented by the Beach Real Estate Fund team. We thank you all for being here, both those that are in person and those that are on the live stream. I'm going to keep my opening remarks somewhat brief. We have a lot of detail to get into today and want to make sure that we have time at the end for Q&A, in addition to make sure we have time to mingle after and enjoy refreshments and appetizers that we're going to have. And so we're going to do things a little bit differently this year. We're going to touch on some of the platform specifics. We're going to jump into the Fund 1 detail. After that, we're going to pause for questions. We want you to be able to ask questions while the data and the information is fresh in your mind. From there, we'll pivot to Fund 2, talk about how we're progressing with that, and then tie it all together at the end with a little talk about a market overview and deployment strategy, and then we'll end with the final Q&A session should there be any more questions. And so with that, let's get into it. So the Beach Real Estate Fund team, the BREF platform is what we call ourselves. We've had a lot of success over the last 5 years and a lot of growth, as mentioned by Dan and John. That includes 2 funds. That includes $200 million raised between those 2 funds, almost $400 million of gross acquisitions spread across 11 investments and almost 2,000 units. You know, the stat that you do not see up here are the 5, now 6 dedicated team members, as Dan mentioned, that are working day to day to ensure that we are managing this portfolio, finding new investments, and making sure that there's strategic alignment with your end goal. In addition to that, all the support staff from the broader Beach company, which we are constantly able to leverage on a day-to-day basis to help us make decisions and move forward. So in the past, we've had discussions on why real estate, why multifamily, why invest in the Southeast, why pursue value add. Going into today's meeting, we think it's very important to discuss why funds. Why did you all choose to make a fund investment as part of your real estate exposure strategy? And for us, we've narrowed it down to really 4 main categories. The first and most obvious being the return. So through an real estate investment fund, you get the potential of strong yields plus appreciation for a total return that, quite frankly, is hard to replicate in other sectors. From your perspective, this is a passive investment. You trusted us with your equity. You get to sit back, hopefully relaxed, and trust that we are going to manage the day-to-day and hopefully produce a return for you at the end of the day. Lastly, accessibility. The type of investments that we pursue, specifically multifamily real estate, due to the size, due to the amount of expertise needed, are quite inaccessible to most folks. And so by investing through our fund, we give you access to this type of real estate where others do not have it. And last, it enables you to diversify your broader real estate portfolio. And more importantly, it allows you to spread that risk across many different assets so that no one single asset, as long as it's within a well-constructed portfolio, will have an overweight impact on the end gain. All right, jumping into Fund 1. So we're going to start with a little overview on Fund 1. Most of these metrics that you see here are going to be covered in much more detail in later slides. The couple things that I want to bring to your attention are the $74 million of committed capital that we have. Of that, 73.4 million has been called. That leaves about $775,000 of uncalled capital. To be very forward with you, that is not a lot of capital. And so it makes liquidity and cash management very important. And because of that, we hold monthly meetings, all hands-on with us, accounting, senior management, where we analyze the cash position not only at the asset level, but portfolio level. From there, we update our forecasts on a regular basis. And so historically, you might do this semi-annually, you might do it on a quarterly basis. We are now doing this monthly. And the reason being is we want to know at all times where we are and what we need to project not only a month, but 6 months, a year, 2 years from now. So we're constantly able to strategize on a path forward and the best path forward for each individual asset, ensuring that it rolls up to the best possible outcome for the portfolio. Here's a snapshot of the investment portfolio for Beach Real Estate Fund 1. So the top 2 assets, these assets have been sold. You know, we're going to remind you here in a little bit of the outcome of that. And then the 6 that remain are part of the current investment portfolio. So later on in the presentation, it's going to be a bit of a tedious exercise, so you got to bear with us a little bit, but it's important. We're going to go through each asset one by one. It's important for you all to know where each asset stands and what the strategy is on a go-forward basis. So financing strategy is very important, really mission critical as it relates to real estate. It provides liquidity, it increases our buying power. If used properly, it'll enhance returns, but also there's a lot of risk involved with that. And so with the rise in interest rates, what you're seeing that those that are under levered, that have a lot of variable rate debt that didn't hedge it, you're seeing a significant impact to property cash flows and values, unlike anything that we've seen in quite some time. So when you look at our debt exposure and you see 86% floating rate debt, that may raise a little bit of an alarm. However, all of our floating rate debt is currently hedged. And so when you think about financing strategy, it becomes almost as important as asset strategy. And by that, I mean you have to diversify. You have to make sure that your maturities are spread out over time so that you're not taking market risk or liquidity risk in any specific year. In addition, you want typically more of a broad exposure to different type of lenders. Now, multifamily is a bit unique in that we have the benefit of working with agencies, both Freddie and Fannie. They are the predominant lender, the predominant source of liquidity in the industry. And for that, it's very common in multifamily portfolios to see a pretty heavy concentration to the agencies. So going back to maturities, as you can see by the dark green columns here, we do not have a lot of upcoming maturities. We do have one this year at West Wind, which is located here in Charleston. That loan does have 2 one-year extensions, but there are reasons that we might not want to use those extensions, and we're going to get into that when we talk about West Wind. What we are hyper-focused on are what you see with the light blue columns here, and that is our IO expirations. And so when our interest-only period expires, these loans will start amortizing. That creates an unavoidable negative impact to cash flows. And so those forecasts that I spoke about previously become even more important. So that way we can prepare for this and understand once this loan starts amortizing, are we going to be able to cover our debt? If we cover our debt, by how much? What will our yield be? Will we be able to put enough in reserve in case something happens for the asset? Understanding that now before it's happened so we can put strategy and decisions in place to avoid a negative outcome. All right, so one of the biggest questions, or most frequently asked questions that we get is why aren't we making a distribution, right? And the simple answer to that is our exposure to variable rate debt and the hedging strategies we put in place. Now I say that and it sounds very negative, right? But let's walk through the numbers and explain why at the end of the day it's very much a positive. And so let's look at the top left-hand chart here. As you can see, let's go to Q2 2022. That's when interest rates started rising. And that dark green line represents where our portfolio level interest rates would have gone had we not hedged. That gets to about 8%. Because we hedged, which is represented by the brown line here, we're at about 3.5%. And so let's quantitate that for you. So on a trailing 12-month basis, had we not hedged our floating rate debt, we would have paid around $9.8 million in interest expense. Because we hedged, we paid 3.7, so a gross benefit of approximately $6 million. Now let's strip out the interest rate cap escrows that we're forced to escrow of $2.4 million, and you're left with a net benefit of $3.6 million. So in the last year, because of our hedging strategy on a net-net basis, we saved $3.6 million, which our fund desperately needs. Moving to the top right here, we're going to get into the cap rate escrows. I know you've heard about this. We've mentioned it in quarterly reports. I think we talked about it last year. It may be a bit redundant, but it's very important to go through this one more time. And so let's use a very basic example, right? Let's say we bought an asset in Q2 2022. We put an interest rate cap, we put a hedge in place on our floating rate debt. That cap probably cost somewhere around $100, or excuse me, I wish, $100,000 at that time. So let's fast forward up to Q1 2024. That same cap now costs $1.5 million. And so, with our interest rate caps, we are contractually obligated with our lender to provide monthly escrows so that when that cap expires, we're in position to buy a new one. There is no way around it, right? And so let's think about that $100,000 cap that we bought in Q2 2022. Over that 24-month period of time, that would have been somewhere around $5,000, $6,000 a month. Not that bad, right? Now let's take into account pricing today. Interest rates go up, cap pricing goes up. All of a sudden, this cap now costs $1.5 million. If you look at that $1.5 million over the same 24-month period of time, that's $63,000 a month. So you're going from $4,000 to $5,000 to $63,000. You can see how the rise in interest rates and the rise in cap costs and the resulting increase in our cap escrows, what happened between Q2 22 and Q1 24. Now, right here, our monthly escrow, that's Q2 2022, for the entire portfolio was around $15,000 to $20,000 at that time. As of Q1 2024, our monthly escrow is somewhere between $200,000 and $225,000 a month. And so let's talk about totals for a second. So let's go to the bottom right-hand side here. Since Q2 22, we have escrowed approximately $3.4 million. Now, the silver lining here and the key word is this is an escrow. We sell the property, we get the money back, we're able to distribute it. Also, if we sell the property, we can also sell the cap, maybe make a little profit there. Not banking on that, but it's a possibility. And so if you take this $3.4 million, let's divide it by 7, because there's been 7 quarters since here. That's approximately more than that, $475,000 in distributable income that we would have normally sent back to you guys. Unfortunately, it's being held in an escrow. It's not going anywhere. Hopefully one day we'll be in position to release that money. But right now, we are unable to because of how much these costs have gone. All right, so let's move into operations. It's important to understand what's happening at the asset level, what we're seeing, what's driving income, and ultimately how that is impacting our strategy and our decision on a go-forward basis. And so over the last year, we've really transitioned and pivoted from a value creation strategy to a value preservation strategy. Nothing wrong with value preservation strategy. If anything, those that are better able to execute that over the creation end up making more money. So we made a pivot, right? So our original business plan is a value-add business plan. We identify assets with under-market rents. We go in, we renovate, we make some improvements, and we try to close that gap to market, effectively increasing rents at a pretty good clip, right? Well, now market rents have declined. We're not able to see those increases that we're used to. And so in order to preserve value, preserve your top line, you have to switch your strategy a little bit. You don't want to turn through units. You don't want to take those out to market. You want to keep people in place. And so take your attention on to this top left-hand side, trailing 12-month rent trend, right? This time last year, we were right here. We had about $150, $170 loss to lease. What that means is someone moved out. We think we can go and rent this unit for $170 more than where they currently were. Very healthy, a lot of growth. Well, what's happened over the last 12 months is you see that rent growth has come down. Some of that is market softness, both more macro and micro. Some of that is our own vacancy and delinquency exposure. Regardless, market rents have trended down. However, our in-place rents, the dark green line, we've still been able to increase rents. We've had 4.3% rent growth over the last 12 months. However, you have market rents coming down, our in-place rents are coming up. That loss to lease that was $170 a year ago is now about $33 or 3%. So still a net positive. Look, someone moves out, we'll go lease it at market, we'll rent it for more. That's great. However, let's take into consideration the downtime. So the time that it takes to make that unit rent ready. Could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, depending on the condition. It could cost us $500 to $1,000 to make it rent ready. So on a net basis, you're actually losing money by taking these units to market. So how do you avoid this? What is the strategy? And it goes to the preservation piece. You maximize retention. So on a trailing 12-month basis here, our retention is about 45%. Now, if market rents were up, we're executing our value add business plan, this is a great number. We're getting a lot of people out. We're renting those units for more. We're increasing our rent roll. On a go-forward basis, because of where we are here, we need that number to go to 55 to 60%. That's the goal here. By doing that, we can get minimal increases. I say minimal. We can probably get 2 to 3, maybe even 4% on renewal while keeping people in place, avoiding vacancy costs and avoiding turn costs. And so that's been the transition that we've had over the last 12 months. And so the key on a go-forward basis, until we get some market momentum, is getting this number up here. Lastly, touching on interior renovation, we've renovated almost, call it 534 units. Across the entire Fund 1 portfolio, we have either completed our interior renovation program or we've paused because of where market rents are. Now, we are holding some of that money in reserve. Should we get some market momentum, we might start renovating some of the units again at select assets. However, there may come a time where there's a higher and best use for that money. Maybe it's addressing deferred maintenance needs. Maybe it's helping an asset's liquidity position. But we're constantly monitoring so that way we can pick back up this strategy should those markets start getting a little momentum. Okay, another question that we get a lot, why is your vacancy so high? Are there demand side issues in the market? Well, my answer to that is to no. I wish I would have added it up here. Our leasing trends, our closing ratios are fantastic. Our site teams are leasing well, we're getting people in the door, our advertising's working. If you look at historical norms, we've actually probably outperformed that over the last 12 months. And so you're sitting here scratching your head, what in the world is happening? Well, in our opinion, it's all about delinquency. So you have delinquent tenants, that leads to an increased number of move-outs via skips and evictions, and all of a sudden where you expect 10 units back a month through the course of normal move-outs, all of a sudden you're seeing 15, you're seeing 20. It increases the amount that you have to lease to where we're not able to keep up with it despite the phenomenal leasing activity that we have on the sites. So let's dive into delinquency a little bit. And for the purposes of this slide, of this exercise, it's sort of a tale of two cities, right? And so we're going to strip out Parks at Utoy Creek in Atlanta from the other 5 properties in the portfolio. The other 5 properties in the portfolio are here on this blue line that go all the way down. So you can see most of the delinquency at these properties are 0 to 30 days. That means they're 1 month behind. That's very common because what happens is a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. They can't give you a lump sum payment for rent at the first, second of every month. They need to pay as their money comes in. And so a lot of times you see this elevated, but it trails off nicely. So In regards to the other portfolio, see the blue column here, after 31 days, it decreases quite significantly. So what that implies is really two things. One, these tenants end up paying, which is a good thing. They just need time to catch up with it, and it's just they're always going to be late. It is what it is. Secondly, these assets are located in markets that have an efficient court system. And should they be late for a certain amount of time, we are able to get them out. Now, the general rule of thumb, at least from what we've seen, if a tenant gets 2 months behind, there's really no saving them. It's doubtful that you're ever going to see a dime, and they're well on their way into the eviction process, or they'll just skip and go on to another property. All right, let's look at Parks at Utoy Creek. Remember, the green bar here. It's the exact opposite of the other 5 assets. Most of the delinquency, residents are over 90 days delinquent. So what that means is we are unable to get these tenants out. They've been living at the property, it's in some cases 18 to 20 months without paying rent, and it's just a product of an inefficient court system. And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about it. So let's talk about our delinquency trend. It spiked, call it Q3, Q4 last year. There was a wave of fraud across most of the markets that we operate in, unlike anything we've ever seen. It can't really explain it, but it happened, even with our fraud protocols and checks and balances in place. People are getting creative. They're learning ways around the system. They're learning how to make their paychecks in a way that it's undetectable that if it's false or not, or their bank statements, or even who they are. You can do a quick Google search or go to YouTube, and you can find a video that's going to show you how to bypass some of the best software that we can buy to be able to rent these units. And so, anyway, delinquency peaked, call it last year in Q4. That's not that surprising, primarily because the courts do shut down around Q4. They're not going to process a lot of evictions going into the holiday season. However, the good news is, if you look at Q1, we're down about 35%. And so this is a trend that has to continue. We have to keep making progress. It's going to be incremental, but we have to keep making progress, because I can't stress this enough. Delinquency is probably the biggest hurdle that we face, and in our opinion, it's probably the biggest risk to multifamily from an operational perspective that exists in the market today.
Hey, Ward, is there any insurance that could be purchased to offset any of that risk, or is that just
No. No, there's not. You know, I'm thinking through that a little bit. No, not that I have seen. I think there's something similar, but I think it's not that we've been able to find. All right, so we talked about where we are a little bit. We're about to take a big dive into where we're going. Let's not forget where we came from, right? So 3 deals that have already been sold with Fund 1. Fantastic returns, right? 60% IRR, almost 3x multiple, $46 million. Let's keep this in the back of our mind, right? We're playing with the lead right now. And let's talk about how we're going to maintain that lead with our other investments. So at the end of the day, we come out to where we want to be. All right, so we're going to hop in and talk about little asset by asset detail. And so you guys know, I'm going to go back to those forecasts we keep talking about. What we do is we look at past performance, we look at our future performance, we look at what our debt position is, we take into account market risk, market liquidity, and we combine all these factors together on a pretty regular basis to determine, should we hold, should we sell this asset, right? And so, about to tell you guys the outcome of those exercises. And let's start with Somerville Station, located here in the Charleston market. Most of you may recall we lost 32 units in September of 22 to a fire. Unfortunately, through a pretty extensive and exhaustive exercise, it's just not financially feasible to rebuild these units. It doesn't make financial sense. And so we've been operating without the revenue from these 32 units for past year and a half, right? And that's almost $500,000 a year. Because of this, we decided that we were going to take this asset out to market, call it late last year, early this year. Well, what happened, I'm going to back up just a minute, is this delinquency spike. Somerville experienced a massive wave of fraud in the market that made our delinquency spike. The result of that were a bunch of evictions, a bunch of move-outs, a bunch of skips that occurred pretty quickly after it happened, but our vacancy went up significantly. So from an operational perspective, the asset, in our opinion, we needed to improve our income statement in order to achieve the value that we know is here. And so we've punted, we've kicked the can down the road on marketing this asset. However, our interest-only period does expire in January of next year. And so when that happens, it's probably going to mean that this asset will be operating at a deficit once that happens. And so we are recommending that we will probably pursue a sale of this asset between now and the end of the year. Moving to north side of Merriman, this asset is located in Asheville, one of the best performing assets in the portfolio. 166 units, old vintage 1948. This asset has been performing about as well as anything I've seen, both on a revenue side and an expense side. I think from a rental perspective, we've increased rents $410. That's 31% since we bought it. It is cash flowing very well. However, there are a series of things that are about to start happening at this property that are going to significantly deteriorate that cash flow. The first being our interest rate cap is going to expire in July of this year. Once that expires and we have to buy a new cap, our interest rate's going to go up 195 basis points, thus higher interest expense. Plenty of cash flow to cover it, but it's going to take a hit. At the same time, we're entering a tax reassessment year. Our real estate taxes are going to double, $170,000 to almost $320,000. So another cash flow hit. Fast forward a couple years down the road, we start amortizing, and while the property should maintain its positive cash flow position, the yield will be very small. And so, taking that into consideration, understanding that we've grown rents very significantly here, and that while I don't necessarily believe there's a ceiling in place, that rent growth is going to be significantly moderated on a go-forward basis, just due to market conditions and due on how much we've pushed, right? So we're not going to have that significant increase in revenue to offset some of these things coming down the tracks that are going to hurt cash flow. So in our opinion, why don't we go see what we can get for this asset? Let's see if we can't get a good number, harvest a good return, deliver a good IRR, and see what the market's going to give us. We don't have to. If the numbers aren't there, we can back off, but it's worth a shot to go see if we can't make a good return on this asset. All right, Westwind Apartments, another one located here in Charleston. Another deal, performed beautifully since we bought it. I think this one, the rents are up $427, right? That's almost 40% from when we acquired the deal. However, we have this looming maturity coming up in October 24. I mentioned that we have 2 one-year extensions. However, the lender is currently sweeping all of our cash from this deal. And so where we are used to harvesting a good cash return, a good yield from this deal, with that no longer being possible, it probably makes sense for us to see if we can't go again, get a good number, sell at a profit, deliver a good IRR and distribution back to you guys. Moving to North Oaks Landing, Raleigh, North Carolina, 200 units. It's in the Millbrook submarket with North Raleigh. This is a deal that came out of the gate swinging. We had a great year one. I think rents were up 19% after year one. However, this market has become very soft. Things have sort of flatlined at this property. And so we've been unable to grow revenue for the past few months. Expenses are fine. We're keeping those in check. But we just don't have the growth that we need right now. However, this is market driven. All we need is some little momentum, little changes in the market, and we think there's still upside to this deal. We think there's still good operational upside. We think we can grow value, but we need to hold this asset. We need to work through some of the volatility that we're seeing at the market, and so we need to give this one time. And because of that upside, we want to hold this deal for a little longer.
So Ward on Westwind, is that a lender covenant that's prohibiting you from distributing?
Yes, sir. So to be very specific, so we must meet certain debt service coverage ratio tests on a quarterly basis. However, the way that the lender does it is they don't take into the individual property, excuse me. No debt that we currently, all debt is encumbered by an individual asset. There's no cross collateralization amongst assets or at the fund level. And so individual property, and so we have to pass these debt service coverage ratio tests. But where we very much disagree with our lender is how those are calculated. So instead of using the interest rate we pay today, instead of getting credit for the cap, the hedge that we put in place, essentially they're using an interest rate at whatever market is at that point in time. So let's go back to the other slide that we did, that's 8%. And we don't even get credit for the interest-only period that we have through the full term of the loan. It's based on an amortizing basis. And so it works against us in a way, and because we don't meet that covenant, they are sweeping our cash. However, that is going into an escrow. Seems like all of your cash is going to an escrow, right? It's going to an escrow. Should we sell the deal, we will get that money back. Unfortunately, using the methodology that the lender does to calculate those coverage ratio tests, we don't see a path to getting out of their cash management protocols unless there's a significant decrease in interest rates. Now, if that happens, I think we would all be very happy, but could mean some other things are going on in the market that might be a little uneasy. Oh, yeah, here's another good one. So we sat down with the lender. Said, look, let's talk about this. The asset's performing. We're doing great. You got to work with us on these coverage ratio covenants, right? Like this is a little absurd. So we sit down with the lender, and they informed us that West Wind Apartments is a top 3 performing asset in their entire portfolio of over 100 deals. That includes multifamily, office, retail, industrial, et cetera. No, they did not. Unfortunately, their hands are tied. They cannot change. They did offer what they thought was sort of a meet in the middle, but it was very egregious in terms of paying a large lump sum right now, and it didn't make any sense. So, moving forward. All right, Water's Edge, Columbia, South Carolina, most recent Fund 1 deal. Very similar situation to what we talked about at North Oaks and Raleigh, right? Good success year 1, a lot of upside. Market softness is keeping things compressed right now. We saw glimpses of it last year in Q3, and so we know the upside's there. We just need to give it time. We need the market to turn around for us just a little bit, and we think there's good momentum that's going to carry this asset. So for now, we're recommending we hold on, see what happens in the market, do what we can to stabilize operations, and be ready to ride the wave, hopefully, once it starts carrying us up. And I'm going to skip Parks at Utoy Creek. No. So the moment we've all been waiting for, right? Probably a lot of the questions that we need to ask is Parks at Utoy Creek. It's property in Atlanta, Georgia. You've heard it mentioned many times now. And I'm going to cut to the chase. We're under contract to sell this asset for $27 million. Yes, it's a loss. No, it is not a desirable outcome, but it is a necessary outcome right now in order to save the fund's liquidity position and not hurt other assets within our portfolio. And let me explain that in a little more detail, but before that, let's back up to January 2022 when we acquired the property. At that time, there was not a lot of delinquency at this asset or this market. The reason for that, or part of the reason for that, was at the time you still had the post-COVID rental assistance programs. So a lot of people were getting their rent paid for, whether it be some sort of municipal, state, or federal program, and so they were subsidizing their rent. So the first year of operations, we had high occupancies. We were collecting rent from the resident and government, and we were able to grow rents. And so during the first year, things were moving along pretty good at Parks at Utoy Creek. And then December 22, all the rental assistance programs were abruptly ended. Now what happened was delinquency spiked almost immediately because residents were not prepared to pay for rent. They didn't want to pay for rent. They'd become used to not paying rent, so why would they? And so delinquency spiked almost immediately, and then eviction filings spiked immediately after that. And so what occurred was all of a sudden the Fulton County courts found themselves in a significant backlog position. And we're talking 9 to 12 months. And that backlog exists to this day. So call it a year and a half later, there's still a 9 to 12 month backlog on getting evictions processed through the courts. Now, that timeline is further exacerbated because in order to execute these evictions, you need sheriffs and marshals to go do the set-outs. They are so overwhelmed, there's another probably 3 to 6 month delay there. So best case scenario, you might be able to get someone through in 9 months. Worst case, you're at 18 plus months. And unfortunately, if you look at our delinquency position, a lot of our residents are in that category where they are well over 90 days delinquent, some up to 2 years. Now,
Who's crazy enough to buy it from us?
what's that?
Who's crazy enough to buy it from us, given the Atlanta market issues?
So I have a lot of opinions on that, Pat. One being, I think you have someone that is unfamiliar with the situation. Based on the questions that have been asked to us through the early process, makes me think that they don't know what's going on. So I think they're going to find out pretty quickly, right? Because we don't see a pathway to success here. This is going to be a lingering problem for some time. It's going to take so long to unwind what has been done. We do not have that time, right? And then we're probably thinking, look, why can't we backfill these units with good tenants? Well, we see a lot of demand, but only about 1 out of every 10 that walks through our door qualifies, because we're not going to budge on our qualification standards. We don't want to fill this property up with bad tenants again. And so because of that, we're unable to backfill these units. There's a lot of headwinds that are going to remain in this market, and there's just not a path to being positive. And so because of these reasons, this asset has been operating at a deficit. That's around $100,000 a month. Yes.
How much of a loss would you take if I'm selling at that price?
About 15 million. 15.
What do we buy per door?
137. 104. So right now, like I said, operating deficit around 100,000 a month. That is being covered by the fund every month. If we continue to do this, we are going to put the fund in a significant liquidity pinch. It is not sustainable, both at the fund level, and then we put our other assets at risk because we need reserves in case something happens at the other assets. It is in our best interest to sell this deal. Again, it's not the most desired outcome. It's not a decision we've taken lightly. We know it's a bad return. Luckily, we have some offsetting positive things that are happening, that have happened and will happen to help offset this. But it's in our best interest, both from an asset level and fund level, to continue forward with this sale. All right, so let's sum it up. Here's a summary of everything we just covered, our recommendation on each deal, including Parks at Utoy Creek. And so keep in mind, these are all target disposition dates, right? We are targeting this. This is part of our plan now. The market's going to dictate whether or not we're able to execute this, but this is the goal. Let's talk about what this looks like once you roll it all up. So we're still forecasting positive net returns, positive double-digit returns, I might add, at the end of the day. And it only takes a little bit of positive market momentum, as I mentioned, across some of these properties to start increasing that number up a little bit. So with that, I want to pause. I know we've been asking some questions, but now that the information's fresh in your mind, I want to address any questions that you might have. None?
What would you say is a lesson learned from that last deal, the Parks deal? If you were to go back to Q.
How many projects are subsidized?
How many projects are subsidized? In terms of?
Government subsidy. Perhaps there's a Atlanta project that's government subsidized, correct?
No, sir, it is not.
Section 8?
No, so Section 8 was actually a strategy that we started using last year. We thought to ourselves, look, if we can't beat them, let's join them, right? And so what we did was we started renting Section 8 units, where we weren't the only ones in the market that had that idea. And the demand is so great for that, we didn't see that pop in occupancy that we were hoping to achieve by employing that strategy.
I think maybe another way to answer the question is, what proportion of the remaining portfolio is also subject to that similar risk that you faced in government subsidies being taken away?
Most of them, but we've been able to work through it on the other assets. And so remember, those subsidies were removed in December of '22. And we did see delinquency spike at a lot of other assets when that happened. Luckily, we've been able to work through it at the other assets. Here, we have not been able to.
But in fairness, Lord, the other assets, y'all hadn't had the same challenges. It's Atlanta specific, and it's drained a lot of your time, obviously, and cash flow.
So Atlanta is the worst. We do have delinquency problems, delinquency risk at a lot of the other assets. It is not as bad. It is more manageable at the others. Here, it's detrimental. Yes.
Follow on that comment, is the delinquency a broad problem, or is it related to, for example, the borrower you're borrowing from? In other words, if you're borrowing from Freddie Mac, do they put those delinquency restrictions on you, or are those delinquency restrictions no matter, is that just local?
I'm sorry, let me be very specific. When I refer to delinquency, we are referring to money that the tenant owes us,
That's what I mean. So
not delinquency of us owing, not being delinquent to the lender.
just to be clear, so if you borrow from Freddie Mac, do they put restrictions on you on what you can do by way of evicting tenants?
Yes, oh, absolutely. Yeah, so essentially what you have to do is adhere to the CARES Act. And so that even extends the process even more because you're required to give a 30-day notice, right? You don't pay me rent on the 1st, you're late by the 10th. I'm going to give you notice on the 11th. You don't pay me, it's not till the 11th of the following month where I can actually file the eviction and start that process and get into the court backlog of 9 to 12 months.
So setting aside the economic value of borrowing from Freddie Mac or a government agency, but another lender wouldn't be able to put those same CARES Act restrictions.
They do not. And so Westwind is a very good example of that. Water's Edge and Columbia is a very good example of that. That's bank debt and debt fund. We do not have to adhere to the CARES Act. And so the day that you are late on the 11th, we can immediately file.
And then just a quick follow-on to that, on the interest rate side, you chose variable rate with caps as opposed to fixed rate debt, outright fixed rate debt, which would be, I mean, obviously, set aside what's happened the last 2 years, are you evaluating how you use variable and caps versus straight out fixed rate?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So now given it is asset specific, it is investment strategy specific. You know, right now we're seeing more value with going with a fixed rate product. However, due to our business plan, variable rate debt has a lot of benefits to it. Number one, when we did do it, interest rates were 0. And secondly, you have exit flexibility with variable rate debt. And so there's very minimal prepayment penalty that you have with fixed.
You getting paid interest on the escrow?
The lender is. Sorry.
And then the escrow, so you're basically funding an in-the-money cap, basically?
Yes.
And so is there option value as well in that? So it's not just the difference between the current market rate and the cap rate, but also there's some option, some premium above that as well?
There can be, yes.
So if you refinance, do you release that optionality so you'll actually get positive?
Yes. Yeah.
There's other extra value.
So refinancing is also another strategy, right? A lot of times we look at that and instead of saying hold sell, it's hold sell or refinance. You know, fortunately where interest rates are today, it's just not accretive.
Are you gonna need to sell Water's Edge if you don't get the interest-only period extended?
Not necessarily. We are currently working with the lender to extend our interest-only period, which does expire in August. They seem very willing to work with us. And so while I wouldn't call it mission critical, it's going to go a long way to help us, right? Because we need that extra year to get some of that positive momentum back. But it will weigh on our decision come August if it's not granted.
Have you put values on the sell-ins of there?
What's that?
Have you put values on what you expect to get in the next 2 quarters from sales, potentially selling those 4 assets?
Rough.
And how does that impact that IRR calculation?
Yeah, there's rough values, right? Some are internal. Some we have reached out to our friends in the broker community who we would use to help sell some of these deals, and they've given us their opinion. And so we have looked at it both ways, and that is included here. Now, that goes towards the upside that I was talking about, right? Because that's more or less at a point in time. Whereas, you get a little growth, you get a little momentum, that value is going to increase in the future. And so that would help drive that IRR up.
Any guess on, return of capital by the end of the year to investors versus having to retain for escrow the remaining properties?
I don't want to give you a false number, but I promise you I will follow up with you because based on our forecasts and projections, we have what we would expect. We would retain some just to maximize our liquidity position or optimize our liquidity position, I suspect. But like I said, you sell at Parks at Utoy Creek, that goes a long way in helping you. Any other questions? Remember, we have a Q&A at the end, and so if you haven't asked anything or something comes up, or if you think of it between now and the end, we can always ask it at the end. How about this? Why don't we take a poll, everyone in the room, on where we think it'll be a month from now? And I bet we'll all be wrong. I'm done trying to guess interest rates. Anytime I come to it. I'm not willing to make that bet right now. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I'm not going to invest your dollars on the basis of it's only going to work if that happens. So, all right. Louis Softner, Investor Relations. I'm going to hand it over to you for a little bit.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As most of you know, my name is Louis Softner, and I serve as our Director of Investor Relations for the Beach Company. I am going to start. I apologize for everybody on the live stream. The comments weren't on, so if you were trying to ask a question, we will try to answer it at the end of the presentation. Now that they're rolling in, but it looks like we got them turned on. And we will also try to repeat the question for many of our in-person audience as well. It sounds like they might not be able to hear them. With that, we're going to go ahead and switch gears, and we're going to move into our Fund 2 equity and operations overview. As a reminder, we officially launched our second discretionary fund in the summer of 2022, around the same time that our investment period was ending for Fund 1. We held our first equity closing in July of 2022 for this fund, and we are pleased to share that as of this January, we did round out our total equity raise, ending with a total fund level capital commitment amount of $84.5 million roughly. As always, we want to thank you, all of our partners, for continuing to place your trust in us by making a commitment to our second fund. As already mentioned today, we did face some unforeseen headwinds and market shifts, capital raising issues in 2023, but like many others in our industry. But despite falling a little short of our equity raise goal for Fund 2, we were able to also secure an additional $22.6 million of co-investment capital for our first 2 properties in Fund 2. Therefore, as of today, our BREF team has a total investable equity amount of approximately $107 million, which was above our expected equity raise goal for Fund 2. And we do anticipate offering more co-investment opportunities on future acquisitions, so this total investable equity amount will continue to grow. Looking deeper into our Fund 2 level equity summary, we have called in approximately $32.4 million, or just north of 38% of our total committed amount to date. This leaves us with around $52 million of uncalled committed capital at the fund level. We will continue to reserve a small portion of that, as Ward and other team members have mentioned so far, just for some property renovations and some potential expenses in the future. But we still have a very healthy amount of equity that will be placed into approximately 2 to 3 more properties for this fund. You can see on the timeline below that we have just now entered into our 3-year investment period. However, due to our partners making early commitments in 2022, we were able to seed this portfolio early on in its life cycle with 2 great properties, the Brook in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Marina Landing in Orlando, Florida, for a combined gross purchase price of $97.5 million. A key takeaway from this slide is that we now have the ability to be patient and diligent while we source our next acquisitions, but we also are prepared to act quickly when needed due to our large balance of dry powder. This nice runway in our fund's life allows for our current portfolio of properties to continue to mature and appreciate, while also giving us plenty of time to harvest value in our future acquisitions for this portfolio. Now to dive in a little bit deeper on our Fund 2 properties that we have currently, I'm going to turn it over to Reed Charling, who is our Asset Management Associate for BREF.
Appreciate it, Louis. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for being here. Today, like Louis said, we're going to be going over our Fund 2 portfolio. As you'll see in front of you, there's a quick summary on Fund 2. This portfolio includes the Brook, 162 units located in Pineville, North Carolina, which is a broader part of the Charlotte MSA. And then it also includes Marina Landing, 260 units located in Orlando, Florida, and is part of the Metro West Master Plan community in that area. Going below, we also have a quick summary of our financing detail for each asset. As you can see here, both of these loans are fixed loans with an average in-place rate of 4.32%. I'd like to note that is much lower than today's market interest rates. The Brooks loan moving forward is unique in that proceeds increase with each renovation draw that we submit to the lender, in which they fund 100% of this asset. Just wanting to note that with each report we send out to you, this principal balance will be adjusted. Because of this, we are extremely strategic in how we spend capital at this project. With each dollar we spend and invest into this property, we in turn pay interest back to our lender on this. Moving forward to Marina Landing, this loan is very unique in that it was a loan assumption late 2022. As we're all aware, interest rates were changing dramatically day to day. So it was a key acquisition effort to go after properties with in-place loans rather than placing free and clear or new debt on these properties. We focus on low assumptions with key aspects including low fixed rates, moderate leverage, full interest-only periods, and enough term remaining in these loans to get us through our underwritten hold period. As you can see here with Marina Landing, it is extremely unique. While some may check one or a few of these boxes, Marina Landing checked each and every one of these boxes. So moving forward into BIF2 submarket analysis. Here in the top left chart, you will see Fund 2's market rents compared to that of its submarkets. While it shows quarter-over-quarter growth, we'd like to show that, sorry about that. As rates within the submarket change, we have to strategically revisit and set rates in order to compete and win traffic. With both markets being increasingly price sensitive, this is a process that is extremely important to the asset performance and is a key part of our asset management processes. Thankfully, with Daling software we have in place, this effort is extremely calculated and makes it a lot easier on our team. The graph at the bottom of here shows our occupancies in Fund 2 compared to that of its submarket, and also includes the market rent growth above. It is important to note that while market conditions are a key driver to our market rate adjustments, the asset's internal vacancy exposure is just as important in determining what is best to maximize property performance. As you can see here in 2023, we started with very strong market rents averaging just below $1,700 a unit. I would like to note these did start off early on in 2023 above submarket and were outperforming our comps. As market rents in the submarkets began to decline over that time, as you can see, we had to make a few adjustments and pivot. Our occupancies began to take a decline, and due to renters opting for our comps who had lower rates. This also caused exposure internally with our in-place tenants who are coming up for renewal, are therefore not signing and are leaving for other assets at lower prices. As you can see, once we did make the decision to lower our market rents, our occupancy began to bounce back and allowed us to further increase our market rents once we got more stabilized. We are currently performing, as you can see here at the back end, outperforming our market set. Market rent has come back up, and our occupancy is also higher than our submarkets. To put it plainly, we are outperforming our market so far, and we are continuing to project that currently and going forward. So moving here, you will see our market rents for Fund 2 again, but also including our in-place rents. Note that while market rents were decreasing in each property, as I mentioned, our actual in-place rent growth was fairly healthy. As you can see here, over this time period, in-place rent growth was 8.9% over the past 12 months as we continued to close that loss of lease. This is in turn due to our renewal trade-outs being very healthy as well. Over the 371 leases that expired between this period, 54% of these were signed at an average trade-out of 8.3%. Extremely, extremely healthy and well-performing there. While market rents were lowered to lower our vacancy exposure, these renewals previously leased well below current market rates and therefore in turn produced strong lease tradeouts. Retention of our in-place tenants was instrumental in the stabilization of these assets, allowing our occupancy to continually increase to where it is today, as I showed on the previous slide. While it successfully accomplished that, it also is directly attributable to the in-place rent growth mentioned at 8.9%. Due to this and the decrease in market rents for renovated units, it no longer became accretive to continue the interior renovation program at both these assets, as potential tenants in this market opted for lower price points rather than newly renovated and higher quality units. To put it simply, they looked at lower price units rather than having nice new units. As you can see at the bottom of this chart, the average tradeouts and delta between newly renovated units and these classic units pointed to the need to pause. We paused the program at the Brook in Q3 of 2023 and have just paused this month at Marina Landing. Until the market rents in these markets can justify the need for newly renovated units, the price sensitivity that currently is there in the areas does not currently allow us to continue the programs and have these be beneficial to overall asset performance. The organic rent growth, however, that I mentioned earlier of our classic units is strong enough to justify the lack of spend on these renovated units while still achieving our business goals until we decide to revisit these renovations. As part of our asset management processes, we analyze portfolio performance daily, constantly allowing us to act rather than react to these certain market trends in making key decisions. A key theme that's constantly discussed in the market, and as Ward touched on earlier, is vacancy exposure and bad debt, particularly how it affects the performance of these investments and the funds as wholes. As you can see in the first chart, economic loss since Q2 2023 decreased healthily quarter over quarter. This is due to the occupancy trends that I've discussed on the prior two slides at length, and also our bad debt wearing away very strongly here as well. To the right, you will see delinquency summaries for both these assets and the funds. The top chart shows current month delinquency that makes up nearly 70% of our total delinquency in the portfolio. While that may sound like a lot, furthering and expanding on what Ward was touching earlier, this is a healthy signal, as it means 70% of our delinquency is made up of late-paying tenants who we are collecting from, or current tenants who are in the eviction process and we are evicting very efficiently. This shows that we are able to collect on this delinquency and quickly and effectively move through evictions much swifter than other markets. This is apparent in the bottom chart here, where you can see that while we did have a small spike in Q4 2023, we are constantly able to decrease quarter over quarter balances that do not have high amounts of delinquency carrying over to today. We are extremely optimistic in the continuation of these positive trends across the board for Fund 2, and are even more excited and optimistic in the future performance of these two assets. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Darby Parker, our Manager of Acquisitions.
Home stretch. I'm the last speaker, and then we'll get to Q&A. Well, thank you, Reed, and thank you all for coming out. My name's Darby. I help lead our acquisition efforts here. So we've talked about playing some defense with the portfolio, obviously. Good news is we get to play offense as well. Most think there'd be some big opportunities. We're encouraged by this. We know there's definitely some on the horizon. But it's important to define these opportunities and what that might look like today, and do that for you all as well. So a couple themes to discuss. In real estate, we often find that demand can remain fairly constant, but supply comes in these fits and starts and shorter waves. Said another way, demand is structural, supply is cyclical. We've had these long migration trends benefit our markets for a while, but we just haven't built enough housing. In reality, we build as economic conditions play out. Early in the decade, we had cheap money, low rates, drive a big wave of supply underpinned by this demand. This supply has led to vacancy and less rent growth in the near term as this has been absorbed. Folks that study this space are starting to suggest we may be near the bottom. We can already start to see this wave passing, as there really hasn't been much breaking ground. These projects take 2 to 3 years. We can look to late 25, 26, 27. It's pretty likely there'll be shortages to meet the demand at that time. So some round numbers here. as of today, we need about 4 to 6 million units over the next decade, or close to 700K a year when you factor in attrition and all that. Pre-COVID, we were building 300 to 400K a year. 2022, that was peak. We got 680,000, broke ground at that point, dropped in 23, and we're well below that in 24, such that what actually delivers in 26 to 28, and again, we know the timeline, should be in the high 300s and nowhere near that 700K we need. It's pockety. Certain MSAs can drive the headlines, but on the whole, we feel we have significant runway here, especially in our region. So here you can see those migration trends over the past 5 years. Green is good, red is not so good. Here it is through the end of the decade, and we're here in the green. This is where you want to be. As supply levels out and that demand remains, we might again see outperformance with occupancies and rents up and above that long-term average. And again, there's glimmers of this already, especially in certain pockets. They just released some Q1 data showing it was the third best Q1 for absorption in the past 20 years. This supply is getting absorbed. As such, some are starting to reforecast rent growth to be higher by year end and things like that. Some aren't. Again, we don't time these markets, but it's good to stay aware of all this so we can strategize around these broader shifts, react to the day-to-day, and move the needle in our favor. Another broad point to our strategy is today we feel we're closer to the end than the beginning. Seems we're slowly moving towards historic norms in a more conventional marketplace. We're hearing this everywhere, whether it's insurance, construction prices, equity and debt folks. Pricing and volatility are moderating. It feels like things are getting better. We're not done, it's not perfect, but we're moving in the right direction. And that means we're staying active. We're underwriting and touring a lot of product. A lot of it's off market. Sometimes it's sourced from a lender. We don't know when the bottom will hit, or indeed if it already has hit, and we're not trying to. You might miss it. Instead, what we're looking for is pretty simple. We need some level of continuity in the marketplace. We want to see consensus on value. Older vintage in a small market should be valued differently than new vintage in a large market. Feels like we're getting there. These bid sheets are getting tighter. There's a few brokers here can probably attest to that. For a while there, especially late 23, it was all over the place. And we want to see some consistency with our uncontrollables. Those are things like debt and insurance. If those move considerably within a period of a couple weeks, it makes it very tough to navigate these closings that, as you know, can take a couple months. So as we tour and underwrite, we build that context, we see some consistency, and we know how to act when the right opportunity comes along. Taken together, these are all good things. These are structural tailwinds to what we do. They're encouraging in the long run. They help us better strategize in the near term. And frankly, we get to take advantage of some of these headwinds that a lot of other groups are facing. So another big theme, no two cycles are exactly alike. But that said, it's important we study all of them to help inform our strategy today. So we think there's going to be opportunity. We're just not sure if it'll arrive as a huge wave of deeply discounted, attractive multifamily product in the Southeast as of today at 5 o'clock. A lot of money pursuing this space, especially in our market. It's a preferred sector, it's a preferred region. And there's a lot of capital on the sideline to go after this, what we call dry powder. So here you can see that dry powder stacking up over the past decade and change. There's almost $400 billion ready to jump into our space. Not all that money is waiting on the same returns. Different groups are willing to enter at different times. That's important. If you're holding out for a 25% IRR, but someone's willing to take a 15, you'll never get your price. One of the differences, 08, 09 didn't have that dry powder. They didn't have today's lending options. And the lenders didn't have the ability to work with folks if they did have problems. All of those things provide a floor to transaction activity today that wasn't there 15 years ago. We're seeing meaningful but slow transaction activity. Folks are showing up, pricing's competitive, lenders are broadly helpful. These are real transactions. The longer these continue without increased in volatility, the more entrants that jump back into the market, deal volume increases, we further calibrate, move on. Definitely some soft landing vibes in that scenario. Right now, the multifamily market is down about 18% peak to trough. And this gets a little crystal ball, so I'll be careful, but at this point, for Southeast quality multifamily, we feel there need to be real broad deterioration in property performance for pricing to fall much further. That's folks losing jobs, paychecks. Effectively, it's a true recession. And in this moment, it actually seems more likely that if and when, again, crystal ball, that first real rate cut happens, that could serve as a bit of a starting gun for all that dry powder to flood in. Cap rates could compress, pricing could increase, and you could have missed it. To go a little further on this theme, there are scenarios right now where even if a seller wants to exit, say they have no equity left in the project, they want to move on, that lender may not want to take that property. They don't want to hurt their track record, especially if they're all looking at the same potential relief on the horizon. And that relief could come soon. Again, we're just going to look at the data. We're not going to make any conjectures. But if you look at these charts, the one on the left is Fed rate increases, and on the right is its cuts. Time is the x-axis in months. Historically, the Fed starts cutting rates within months of ending its tightening cycle. You can see that relief a couple quarters thereafter. And there's our timeline. It's been about 10 months since the last increase in July of 23. This helps show why these lenders are fine to extend. If history is a guide, it may be all you have to do. Starting to hear phrases like extend and pretend, survive to 25, all popping up. Our friends at Walker & Dunlop put together this nice slide. It shows the amount of carryover or debt from prior years being extended or worked out in some way. There it is at the top there. Multi is the dark blue at the bottom. This is all asset classes within real estate. This is based on the Fed saying they're mostly done with hikes and are looking to start cuts. No one knows when that'll be, but gives everyone some hope. If you can hang on a little longer, things will get better. And that's the market we're competing in. Again, the message is not to avoid the space, but these are just reasons to caution against waiting for an absolute bottom, as again, there's a chance you can miss it. In the end, we're looking for well-located deals at a fair price with a good chance of outperforming our underwriting, which remains conservative. Recently heard an interview between two leaders in the space, both 50-year careers, and they spoke about the reality of 08-09 as being 7 caps for 7 minutes. And they went on to say there were some obvious opportunities, but the obvious ones didn't last long. The market quickly gained efficiency. Folks did well that bought then and for many years thereafter, but it wasn't always obvious based on the underwriting at that time. So there's going to be opportunity. We're seeing some today, but it's important we define this opportunity appropriately and have our strategy flow from there. For BREF today, as we'll talk about, that's mostly leaning into the supply wave and seeking good prices on newer, nicer product. So the inherent goal of BIF2 is capital preservation with growth. We're aiming to get that 12-15 IRR with as minimal risk taking as possible. Broadly, we're seeing that potential in new and pre-stabilized apartments. That's 2010 or newer, if not 2023 and newer, probably still in lease up. Here you can see that wave graphically. Our friends at Berkadia did a nice job zooming out there on the left and noting long-term this is a good thing. But in the short term, there's a lot hitting the market right now. Not all these groups are the same. Some might want to exit their projects faster than others for varying reasons. And we'll be there to see if we can pick up some nice new product below what it might cost to build this today. You haven't seen this from us, you've seen it from a development team, but haven't seen this stuff from us in the past. And that's mostly because we couldn't afford it. It just didn't pencil for our fund returns when everything was a 3 or a 4 cap. These are 4 real deals we went after this year, but we got very close on. I think we were down to the final 1 or 2 buyers on all of these. 3 of them are off market. This stuff, it fits our brand, it fits our talent pool. We build and operate Class A. We have expertise managing. We can scale with our team. We're sent these deals off market. So we're really encouraged by our ability to go after this stuff today and really to do so with some advantages that some of our competition might lack. Notably, that speeches access to certain lenders for product that's in lease-up. Well, what we're finding is there's some financial groups, some we've had relationships with for decades that are seeing this same value thesis and are on board to stretch and help us get safe, fixed financing on a pre-stabilized deal. Not everyone has that access. We got Beach's 80-year brand to thank for opening those doors. And this is big. It was tough to differentiate from all those groups using the high leverage bridge debt in 21 and 22. We now have a solid differentiator. We will absolutely still cover the entire spectrum. We're looking at 80s, we're looking at 90s. But today, what we'd like to see is a little more of a value premium for taking on some of the incremental risk of going after that space. At the moment, that premium feels a little thin, and we need to see a little more calibration there. At the end of the day, if we can get our 12 to 15% targets with newer product and less risk with our capital and rent growth, that's what we're going to do. Again, this broad strategy we see as a bit of a moment in time, so we're giving it our full attention while the window theoretically remains open. So, sorry, another area we're giving a lot of strategic focus is build to rent, or BTR. You might have heard of it, a little buzzy these days. This product it's multifamily, but it's defined by larger units, often detached, townhomes in a row, individual yards, garages. Might find them more often in a suburb than a downtown. We know this stuff. Our development team has built it for years, usually as a way to step back into a neighborhood with some softer massing from our larger towers and such. We put the Charles up there on the top right. That's the project behind me here. It's arguably a very, very high-end BTR project. BTR is not a novel concept. It's been on the radar for the better part of a decade, but we see it entering this 2.0 phase where concept prove out and best practices have had some time to establish, but there's still plenty of runway. And by concept prove, I mean, that's things like efficient layouts, unit sizes, what amenities are best, staffing structures, systems, and how all that might slightly differ from conventional denser multifamily. And you should know this isn't us just jumping to the next shiny object. This is based on meaningful demographic trends and consumer preferences. So follow me here. This is the U.S. population by age. Age is on the bottom there, over 3 differing points in time. The orange, 2 orange colors and the black line, each a decade apart. So 2010, 2019, 2029. You can see that millennial wave on that, further left on the screen move over time. With that pop there being on the parents' couch when they're 18, then they're in the first job, apartment downtown, and now BTR can help that same wave with their first house without a mortgage. You get double the space, you get a yard, a garage, maybe you're in a good school district, and again, you don't have to deal with down payments, 7% mortgage rates. It's a promising space to lean into, and not to mention outside of that, the other wave here is on the senior side, the baby boomers. BTR is providing quite a lot of what this group seems to value in their housing choices. So in short, the projections for BTR are real, they're impressive, and it's an area we'll certainly continue to focus. There are some other strategic areas we're certainly feeling out. An obvious one might be distressed debt. We've studied, we're connected with that space and those that make decisions there. We've talked to our peers. We've been doing that for a better part of a year now, just seeing the tea leaves. But it comes down to time management. The potential for success there is just minimal at the moment. But we're certainly keeping an eye on it, and like that, with everything else I've said today, that could change. And with that, I'll pass it back to Ward to talk about another strategic resource that we've put together, our market analytics program. And then Q&A, and then we're done.
All right, thank you all. I know you've been very patient, very attentive. We've thrown a lot at you. We got a couple more things to go through. I'll get through it pretty quickly, and then we'll be done. So the next piece here, as Darby talked about, was market selection, right? And so this is something pretty excited about here, especially once it gets created. And so what we determined last year was that we needed to take a step back and focus on the most fundamental aspect of real estate investing, and that's location. It is that simple. But in today's world, how do you identify the right location, right? How do you take top-down market data with our bottom-up expertise and find where that rubber meets the road, right? And so what we are attempting to do is take market data, take this market data here, right? Now, each one of these things impact multifamily in some way, right? You have job growth, wage growth, population growth, supply, rents, home prices, et cetera. However, by themselves, they can be somewhat meaningless, right? If I told you there's 5,000 units being delivered in Charleston, okay, well, How many people are moving there? How much of a percentage of the existing inventory is that, et cetera. And so what we've done is we've taken this market data here and we've crunched it, so call it data analytics, into metrics that are very meaningful to multifamily. So rent to income ratios, the cost of rent versus own, apartment demand. Now quantifying demand is very difficult. We've given it our best shot with what we have to work with. Supply risk, much easier to quantitate. And then we've factored in other items such as political risk, climate risk. You know, insurance costs have been a major headwind for the multifamily industry, right? And so making sure that we're adding in that climate risk. And then market liquidity risk. And so what we've done is we have these analytics for every market, right? And what we've done is we've ranked every market based on, from call it 1 to 30, based on who has the best rent to income ratio, what's the cheapest market to rent versus own, or excuse me, where it's more expensive to own versus renting, whatever it may be. And then we get an output that ranks these markets for us. And so what we have then done, and bear with me for a second, is we realize that based on our strategy, you know, development might have a different strategy than us on the value add acquisition side. We need to put greater emphasis on certain things. So maybe it's rent to income ratios. Maybe it's greater emphasis on political risk. And so we've applied weighting to each of these based on how important we think these factors are based on our strategy. And the output, hopefully eventually, is going to be something very simple. So out of 30 markets, we're going to have 3 tiers, and it's as simple as green light, yellow light, red light, right? Whereas tier 1 green markets, these are going to be associated with very strong positive multifamily fundamentals, relatively lower risk, and higher chance of success by going into one of these markets. Now let's hop down to tier 3. Just because it's in a tier 3 market doesn't mean we won't consider it. What it means is that there's risk here. We've identified the risk that exists in these markets. So are we picking the right micro location? And have a number of other factors that justify going into a market that we have quantifiably shown to be riskier. All right, we're wrapping it up. As we said earlier, Fund 2, we have about $50 million in dry powder remaining. Our deployment pace has been slower than what we would like. We still think we're going to buy a deal or 2 this year. Keep in mind we have a 3-year investment period, so we have plenty of time to be patient, but we do want to find good investments and put your capital to work. And so there's 2 important things I want to leave you with. One's going to go back to Fund 1. Since Q3 of 2023, Fund 1, we have not paid management fees from Fund 1. We told ourselves if the fund is not generating cash flow to pay these fees, we are not going to take it. We're not going to call capital pay fees, and we're not going to use cash reserves to pay fees. So we have foregone our fees temporarily, hopefully, with Fund 1. With Fund 2, we realized that deployment pace may be slower than what we expected. Per our docs, we can fee off committed capital during our investment period. We realize that that's going to cause an unnecessary drag on your returns. Because of that, on a go-forward basis, we are only going to fee on invested equity, so the equity we've called and put to work. So with that ends our presentation. We're going to hop into Q&A. I think there's some people that are on the live stream that probably have questions, and we welcome any other questions that you may have. Any?
Yeah.
Any questions on your end from the live stream?
So this one goes back to Fund 1, but we had a person ask what happened with the Somerville Station insurance proceeds.
They are currently being held by the lender. So the question was, where do the insurance proceeds go for Somerville Station? Right now, the lender is currently holding those as well. Should we sell the property, we will get those proceeds back.
You mentioned distressed debt. Can Fund 2 buy distressed debt?
I think what we really meant by that piece was looking at properties with distressed debt to be able to capitalize on buying the property, not actually acquiring distressed debt.
It sounds like it's pretty good to be a lender in this situation.
Anything else? That's it. Thank you all. We really appreciate your attention, and let's go enjoy some drinks and mingle a little bit.